warm welcome to all you wonderful subscribers. We have Jay Weidner with us on the line, and I want to begin this segment to talk a little bit more about Ben Franklin and his magic square that we briefly talked about in the first segment. And this is, of course, a very interesting guy, Benjamin Franklin. He's the a character that you can look at and I guess kind of see both ways. He's admired in one side of the camp, as it were, and in another one, he's, I guess, viewed upon as a kind of a bad guy. I mean, he was a member of the Hellfire Club, and he was into all of this sinister stuff and all of this. And again, I guess we have one of these persons that are quite eclectic in what they do. They're brilliant on one level, and they are attributed to some kind of conspiratorial connection here. I mean, when you research a guy like Ben Franklin, Jay, is this something you pick up on, that this is a very, a man that goes both ways, so to speak, here?
Well, I don't know, exactly. I don't really know exactly what Ben Franklin, I know a lot of people don't, say bad things about him, and I know that they discovered I guess dead bodies buried underneath his house in Philadelphia, or maybe it was in London, I can't remember. And but I think you have to understand the man within his time. I think that's really important. And we don't know who was after him, and we don't know if it isn't possible that the founding fathers of America were. It appears as if they were fighting against the pseudo-Freemasonic order that had started and captured Europe. And from everything that you read or you can find about what the Masonic members of the American founding fathers were saying, they were warning everyone to stay away from the tendrils of European royalty and all of that. And we know that King George was a member, a Freemasonic member. And so I think that the American Revolution was really a rebellion against this pseudo-Freemasonic order that had taken over, just again, in that same time period, 1750 to 1820. I think that eventually the founding fathers lost the struggle, not at the Revolution, but a little bit later during the Civil War. I think that we were finally taken over by the pseudo-Freemasonic orders. I think that we now know pretty much that these groups funded both sides of the American Civil War and were pro-slavery and anti-slavery. It didn't matter because they were just doing everything they could to rip America to shreds. And astoundingly, the only person who seemed to understand what was really going on in America at the time of the Civil War was Abraham Lincoln. I don't know if he was a Freemason or not, but reading Abraham Lincoln's letters, he definitely understands that there's some secret group that's trying to rip America to shreds and then take over, which is exactly what happened after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Getting back to Benjamin Franklin was extremely interested in the electromagnetic field of the Earth and the auroras. This is why he flew his kite up into an electrical storm. He was exploring the hypersphere that exists around the Earth. We know this for a fact. And we know that most of his scientific writings were about the electromagnetic field that's around the Earth. And for those of you who know your alchemy, you know how important that is to the alchemical transmutation. When we look at his magic square, which he drew and created at the same exact time that he was looking into the electromagnetic fields around the Earth, we see that it's a magic square of 8 by 8 or 64, and we see that no matter which way you add up the numbers in the magic square, they come out to be 260, which is the Mayan sacred number, which is the timing frequency of the Mayans, the sacred timing frequency of alchemy. And I'll go into that here. the Mayans say that the 260-day calendar that they created is based on human gestation, the time that it takes to create one single human being inside their mother's womb. We also know that 260 is a harmonic. It's a harmonic of the 26,000 days that the average human being lives. If a human being lives to be approximately 72 years old, they live about 26,000 days, and the 26,000 year-long precession of the equinox, which we know that the Mayans were mapping with their long count calendar, because it adds up to 26,000. So we can see that this 260, 26,000, and I should also add, the Kabbalists believe that that 26 was the number of God. It was the number that they attributed to God. Right. Now, I'm presuming that your audience is extremely intelligent, so I'm going to go way out here and really explain this thing, and maybe they'll get it.
Yeah,
maybe
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
But James Clerk Maxwell, the discoverer of the electromagnetic fields, he wrote a poem about the 27 lines on the geometric cube. And no one has been able to understand what this poem is really about. You can Google this poem and find it until recently. So if your audience knows what a Rubik's Cube is, well, a Rubik's Cube is a hypercube. There's 27 cubes in a Rubik's Cube. And inside the very center of the Rubik's Cube is a single cube that lies at the very center of the Rubik's Cube, surrounded by 26 cubes. Okay? So in higher dimensional physics, the physicists will tell you that the hypercube is the most apt description of the fourth dimension. Okay, so if we look at a Rubik's Cube, we can see that a Rubik's Cube is how you divide up the dimensional space. So we have the three-dimensional world, which is contained in the very center cube of the Rubik's Cube or the hypercube, and this is our world. This is the three-dimensional world. We have height, we have length, and we have width, and this is how we describe our three-dimensional world. The hyperworld is the world that exists around our world. It's the number of cubes that exist around the central cube inside a Rubik's Cube. And there's 26 of those. Okay? This is time. This is the hypersphere. This is the fourth dimension. Okay? So we can see that the fourth dimension is 26 times the size of our dimension. And this is where the 26 number comes from. And this is why the Kabbalists said that God's number was 26, because this hypersphere is what creates our world. It's what informs our world. It's where everything comes from. It's what the Aborigines in Australia called the dream time, where everything starts first and then manifests down into our world. So this 26 cubes that surround the central cube in the Rubik's Cube, or in the hypersphere, is the electromagnetic field. It's the sphere of time. It's the fourth dimension, and it manifests itself down into the central cube, which is third dimensions. What's interesting about the third dimension is that the most important species, the most important thing about the third dimension is animal, plant, and human life, because we are conscious and we can move around within the confines of three-dimensional space. Those living beings are created by the 64 codons of DNA. So life, which is the culmination of the hypersphere with the central cube that makes up our world, three-dimensional space, is defined by the 64 codons and the 26,000 harmonic timing frequency. And so we can see that Benjamin Franklin understood this and was trying in his own primitive way to map this out with his magic square. How he knew it, I don't know. I can't even begin to tell you. I don't know how the people that invented the I Ching, which is also about how the 64 it influences time and how time influences the 64. So these things are working in a partnership or a marriage. The DNA that makes us up is working with the 260 cycle. So it takes 260 days for the DNA to create one human being. And as any good alchemist will tell you, the human being is the culmination of alchemy.
Yeah.
And so this is what he's talking about, and this is really the basic secret of really almost everything. Now, we'll go even one step further here.
Yeah.
If we look at an apple, we can see that an apple is a hypersphere. Okay, it's shaped like a torus, and inside this torus-shaped apple is the seeds of the apple. The seeds are the future of the apple, the future trees, the future apples. Everything of the future of that apple is encased inside the very center of the toroidal-shaped apple, all right?
And,
so
please continue.
God is in the Garden of Eden, and there's two trees in the Garden of Eden. There's the tree of knowledge, and there's the tree of life. And God says to Adam and Eve, you shall not eat of the tree of knowledge, for if you do, you will die. Well, Eve is walking by the tree of knowledge one day, and a snake who's vertical, not horizontal like most snakes are, but vertical, wrapped around the trunk of the tree, tells Eve that God's not telling her the truth, that she can eat of the tree of knowledge and she will not die. So Eve grabs an apple, takes a bite out of it, and sees the seeds inside, which, by the way, are shaped as like a pentagram.
Exactly.
And she sees the secret right there in the apple. And God finds out, banishes us from the Garden of Eden, and this knowledge has been outlawed ever since. We are not allowed to understand the hyperdimensional knowledge in any way, shape, or form. And Terence McKenna once told me that he regarded Jehovah as a cosmic narc. And narc is a hippie term for a police officer. And indeed, that's what it looks like. The Gnostics, the sect of people that have been wiped out by the forces of authority for the last 2,000 years, who wrote the Nag Hammadi texts. Right now, the Mandeans are being wiped out in Iraq. They're going to be extinct within 2 years, they're saying. They said that their philosophy was that everything was backwards, that Jehovah was trying to stop us from finding out our true destiny by stopping Eve from eating of the tree of knowledge. Now that we know that an apple is a hypersphere, we can see that this is indeed the case. And I'll just go one step further. It's no accident that Newton, who was an alchemist, picked an apple as the thing that described to him the forces of gravity. He was sending a symbolic message down to us to go look at the apple and figure it out.
You were reading my mind there, because exactly that was one point I did want to get to. Isn't that amazing? Wow. Jeez.
Well, the final thing of this whole story is when you applied to be a student in Pythagoras' school, Pythagoras, the last thing that happened after you took all your tests to see if you were qualified to join was you